Hello there. This is Dr. K, and today I want to give you an update. It's some pretty exciting news. I am going to start publishing an episode of the Voices of Veterinary Medicine every week instead of just on the first and third Saturdays of every month. When I launched this podcast on December 6th of 2017, I was facing a very steep learning curve. I had to teach myself how to record, how to use teleconferencing software, editing software. I was experimenting with all kinds of different microphones. And I didn't think that I could do any better than committing to a couple of episodes a month. Now I'm getting the hang of it more than I did before. I'm feeling more comfortable with the technology. I've found a good mic, found great editing software, and I'm getting better at it also. And I'm also getting a little faster. So that's one of the reasons that I've decided that I'm going to go ahead and make the promise that we're going to do an episode every single week. The other reason is I've been recording a lot of interviews, and Dr. Hunt's interview was actually recorded around the same time as the last podcast episode, which was Dr. Zini Eng, and that was towards the end of 2017. And since then, I've continued to record, and they're just piling up. And every time I do one of these interviews, I get so excited because these people are so interesting and wonderful, and they have so much to offer. And I really just want to give them to you much more quickly than I had originally planned. So Dr. Hunt's interview is podcast number 14. But since then, I have interviewed so many other amazing people, and I'm getting impatient. I just don't feel like I can keep all of these and just dole them out once every 2 weeks. So after Dr. Hunt, I interviewed Dr. Matt Holland. He is a first-year new graduate who is working in Washington, D.C. as a fellow for the American Association for the Advancement of Science and the AVMA. I interviewed Dr. Dean Scott, who is one of my personal heroes and somebody with 35 years of experience in the field of veterinary medicine. There was Dr. David Thompson, who works for the FSIS, Seth Williams, a third-year veterinary student and fellow podcaster. He is a student at the University of Missouri. And Dr. Amanda Guthrie, wonderful woman who is working as a zoo veterinarian in London. And I interviewed my husband, who's an MD, and we did a comparison of the DVM and the MD degrees. Then Dr. Ashley Dunn, she is an ER veterinarian, recently promoted to medical director, and she is a single mother of 2 young children. And yesterday, I interviewed Dr. Elizabeth Johnson, who is the Associate Dean of Student Success at Lincoln Memorial University, and we had an amazing conversation. So I have all of these interviews and I want to give them to you much quicker. Now that my technical skills are almost up to par and I'm feeling more comfortable with it, I feel like I can make that promise to you. So that's the news. It's going to be every week, and I'm so excited to be able to give you more of these interviews more frequently because there's so many amazing, amazing people in veterinary medicine, and it has been a tremendous honor for me to be able to talk with them. So that's the news that I wanted to give you. I also need to thank new Patreon supporter, Julie Maven. Julie, thank you so much for becoming a supporter of the Voices of Veterinary Medicine podcast. It means so much to me. And to current supporters, Ryan Ninsel, John Sanders, and Maria L., thank you. You guys are not only helping me out financially, but you're giving me moral support, which is the inspiration that I need to keep going. Now, one of you has signed up at the $1 per episode level of support, but Patreon, for some reason, gives you the option to choose to get rewards or not get rewards, and you chose to not get rewards. But I highly suggest that you go back to Patreon and you change it. So just go to my website, podcast tab, follow the Patreon link, and then update your account so that you can get rewards. Because in addition to the monthly bonus recording where I talk about topics in veterinary medicine, I'm also going to be adding a lot of other great benefits for Patreon supporters. So go and check out those different rewards. So I think that just about covers it. Thanks for listening to me ramble. And here's the show. Dr. Timothy Hunt graduated with his DVM degree from the University of Minnesota College of Veterinary Medicine in 1998. He began his career as an associate veterinarian at a multi-doctor mixed animal practice in Southwest Minnesota, eventually becoming a partner in that practice. Dr. Hunt ultimately decided to strike out on his own and spent the next several years as a solo mixed animal practitioner. After selling this practice, he moved to Maine, where he focused on small animal medicine and surgery. It was during this time that he developed an interest in leadership and practice management. Dr. Hunt then went on to serve as medical director at 2 different large AHA certified animal hospitals and as recruiting and professional relations director for VCA animal hospitals before becoming an independent consultant. Over the last several years, Dr. Hunt has managed multi-site hospital groups and is currently the Chief Operations Officer for a multi-site hospital group in New England. Dr. Hunt's breadth of experience over the last 19 years in so many different aspects of veterinary medicine gives him unique insights as well as a wealth of knowledge to draw from in helping hospitals reach their full potential. His specialty is helping hospitals create optimal client-centric experiences by redesigning the way they deliver medical care, leading to improved client satisfaction and increased compliance. Thank you so much for being on the podcast, Dr. Hunt.
You're welcome.
So let me start with just give me a brief idea of why you decided to go into veterinary medicine. Was it when you did?
Like most people, when I was a kid, I grew up on a farm in Southwest Minnesota, and like you said, and we had every single kind of animal that there was, and I always got attached to every single one. And we didn't farm the land. Actually, my father is a political science professor, and so we just rented the farmhouse, and I got to play with all the farmers' animals. And to be honest with you, it's actually kind of a little bit of a sad story because when I was 13, maybe 12, my dog that I was really attached to died. He just withered away and died, and we took him to the veterinarian, and they really didn't know what was going on. This was in the early 80s. Oh, maybe I was younger than that. I might have been 10, so it might have been, in 1980, and they didn't really know what was going on, and after he died, they did a postmortem. He had heartworm disease, and so I was devastated by that, and I kind of solidified my plan that I was going to be a veterinarian. And then I just figured out how much school it was, and I decided that I was not going to be a veterinarian. So, but later on, I actually went into going to do law enforcement. I was going to be a detective. And after 1 year of doing the prereqs for sort of a law enforcement criminal psychology degree, I turned back into veterinary medicine. So.
And then you were a straight arrow after that.
After that, I never deviated from the path.
I'm so sorry to hear about your dog. I can imagine how heartbreaking that would be.
That was terrible. And I was just a little kid too, and I didn't understand what was happening. And probably back in late 70s, early 80s, we were not probably model pet owners at the time. I'm sure we didn't have them on any preventatives, and I didn't know what the veterinary care was like, but it was probably not great for that dog.
Yeah. Times were different then. I remember, I was a kid back then too, and I remember we had dogs, and we did not provide the level of medical care that I do now, or that I expect of people to provide for their pets now. It's a different time. Yeah. So,
better time to be an animal right now.
Pardon me?
Much better time to be an animal right now.
I think so, and hopefully it'll get better and better every day.
Yeah.
So when you started veterinary school, how did you feel? Were you surprised, or was it exactly what you expected? Did you love it? Did you not love it so much?
I loved it. Actually, to be honest with you, I kind of struggled in my undergrad years with retaining focus on what I wanted to do. I mean, I'm a pretty focused person, and I struggled a little bit with I was interested in Greek mythology, but I really wasn't my passion. And so it was hard for me to maintain focus on those things that seemed out of the realm of what my target was. And once I got into veterinary school, I found veterinary school to actually be kind of easy because it was just like right in my laser target, and I could just focus on it, and I didn't have to worry about anything else.
Oh, good. So you had a good time going through vet school.
I had a great time. I found it to be actually, except for the exams, I found it to be actually kind of relaxing because I didn't need to worry about all the other stuff.
Right. Yeah. I tend to like when I can just focus on one subject rather than being scattered. So, after you graduated and you started in this practice, it was a mixed animal practice. Did you feel like that school had adequately prepared you for the work that you were doing?
I'm gonna be honest with you. When I first graduated, my first probably 6 months out, I was clearly in over my head. I felt like I knew nothing. I felt like I was the dumbest person on the entire planet, and that I was a little irritated with my veterinary school because I was like, they didn't teach me this, they didn't teach me that. And then after that very steep learning curve, I'd say it was straight up and down. I realized that they'd given me a very good foundation. They'd given me a very solid. It wasn't their job to build the house; it was their job to give me the blueprints and the foundation, and they did that very, very well. And so I could draw back on everything that I'd learned and build my own house. And so that was, to me, it was another lesson that I learned about veterinary school, but I learned it roughly a year after I graduated.
That is a fantastic analogy. I love that. And so, it, when you did they offer you to become a partner, or did you approach them and ask to become a partner?
They offered me partnership about a year in. They offered it to me. I don't even think I was in a year. I actually had secured that job almost a year before graduating from veterinary school. And they approached me and recruited me before I graduated from veterinary school. And then they offered me partnership about a year after I graduated.
And was that a good decision looking back?
No, it probably was not a great decision. It was, I was too young, I was too naive. I didn't know what I was doing. I should have had a little bit more time under my belt before I did that. Very stressful being a partner to two people who were looking down the road at retirement when I was just starting. And good people, just bad time for me.
Right, right. So maybe part of the problem was when you guys were drafting the contract for the partnership, it wasn't spelled out clearly enough what everybody's expectations were going to be.
Very, very loosely described, yes. And it was, as I learned more about it, and that was also a steep learning curve when I was trying to get out of that partnership. It was not drafted in my favor at all. It was drafted entirely in my partner's favor. And it was very disadvantageous for me at the time. So learned since then. I read contracts very, very carefully.
Yes. And do you think, I mean, not being a lawyer or anything, just if you read it carefully yourself, that usually gives you enough of an idea of whether or not this is something that is probably going to be okay versus, I really need to ask a lawyer about this?
Starting out, I would always ask a lawyer. I'd always get a lawyer involved starting out. Now, a number of years in, I've read a lot of them. I write a lot of contracts. My brother is an attorney, so I can always run something past him if I have any questions about some legalese that is shot my way.
Nice.
At this point, I'm very comfortable reading them and writing them, but that probably came about 10 years in. So it was 10 years of reading
Wow.
contracts.
Wow. So valuable learning lesson.
Yes, very valuable. It cost me dearly at the time.
Well, I think the best lessons in life are expensive because you get what you pay for.
That's exactly right. You couldn't be more right about that.
Okay, and then when you started out on your own, a solo practitioner, was this a mobile practice?
Actually, funny enough, it started out as an idea. I just knew I wasn't going to be in that partnership anymore because I discovered that it was very disadvantageous and it wasn't working for me. And so I knew I wanted to do my own thing. And so I dissolved the partnership, walked away from it, and thought, I don't really know what I'm going to do now. So either I got to get a job or I'm going to do this thing on my own. And my wife and I, we'd just gotten married, just had our first baby. And she said, I think you need to do this on your own. And so I'm like, well, all right, then now what do we do? So then we sort of set up shop in our laundry room and that's where we saw appointments there for the first probably 7 months while I hunted for a space and bartered with the small towns around the area who were looking for businesses to open in their towns, and I just went to the people who would give me the most, and they got me a building, and I moved from my laundry room to a retrofitted old building. So.
Oh my gosh, I love that story. It started in your laundry room. Good on your wife.
Yeah.
What an awesome wife.
Yep, she's very patient.
So at this time, oh God, I can imagine the stress because, you just walked away from this partnership. Finances were probably a concern. You were starting out. You had no idea what you could expect. Wife, baby. And did you have student loans at that time? And
yeah, about $150,000. So I actually got off easy compared to what people have nowadays. And I hadn't paid much by that time. A little bit that you pay, and I think I ended up consolidated or something to bring my payments down. So I really hadn't paid much by that time. And so, yeah, it was a scary time for me because there were a lot of unknowns. Just walking away from 10,000 client base practice to 0 on day one, going, hopefully someone will call me. and they did. It's day one. I had a full book of business.
Wonderful. That is great. And then you spent several years doing that. And
yeah. And we built it from, it was almost exclusively large animal when I first started it because that's what I was doing. And we went to 90% small animal and 10% large animal by the time I sold it.
Wow. That's quite a flip.
Yep. It was where my passion was as I discovered. That's where my passion was as I went through it. I became more and more interested in the detail that you can get into a small animal versus the herd medicine side of it, which I became less enamored with over time.
Right. And based on what you told me about when you were a kid and all the farm animals, and I mean, it sounds like you had personal relationships with all of them, and so you know that they all have individual personalities, and I think if you have that kind of sentiment for animals, it's hard to look at them as production units. So
it is, yeah. And I fired many clients for mistreating their animals. I would not, if I would go out to a farm and I would find them to be too rough, I would give them one chance to correct it, and then I would never go back. You don't get to have me come back. So
yeah.
It was hard on me to watch the conditions that some of the animals live in.
Yeah, and I think it's something that a lot of people don't expect, when they have the dream of becoming a veterinarian and they just put their nose to the grindstone, undergrad, vet school, and then, woo, I'm going to save all the animals. And then you end up seeing a lot of disturbing things, potentially.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. So you switched to 90% small animal, and then you decided you wanted to move somewhere else, or you wanted to.
I wanted to not be there anymore. It was a hard life. It was very hard. We'd been trying to hire an associate veterinarian for almost the entire time that we'd been open because we were really too busy for what I could handle. I needed help.
Feast or famine.
I was drowning, and I needed help really badly, and I couldn't get anybody to even apply. I had ads out. If you've ever taken out an AVMA ad for a job for a veterinarian, they are very expensive. Several $100s a month I was kicking out for ads, and that would just be one ad. And at that point in time, it wasn't online. It was, journals. And you had to be hoping that somebody was going to flip to the back of the AVMA journal to look for your job. And I got 0 applicants in the 3 years I was looking.
Oh my gosh.
And I was desperate. And one night I actually, particularly bad day, and I hadn't seen my little baby boy, who is now, what was he, 3? I think he was 3. I hadn't seen him awake in almost 2 weeks.
Oh my gosh.
Because I would leave so early in the morning and I would get back late at night. And this one day it was one call after another, after another, after another. And then I got in at, I think it was 2:30 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And I walked in and I picked up my little baby and I was holding him, and he's getting to be kind of a big baby now. And I walked in and I tapped my wife on the shoulder and said, "I'm selling my clinic, we're moving, where do you want to go?" And she said, I don't know. Maine is nice. It is.
Oh my gosh. I love it. You have so much chutzpah. Really, just like tons of courage. I mean, that's probably why, I mean, you've got an entrepreneurial spirit and you're willing to take risks, even though they're terrifying.
Oh, terrifying. Absolutely. Like, get into it. It's like, what have I done? Well, here we are. Might as well make it happen.
Right. And you're okay, despite all the risks you've taken, despite all the terror you experienced. One of my favorite quotes is, jump and the net will appear.
That's the way I live my life.
Which is why I wanted to interview you. I just love your history, and I love how bold you've been in taking these risks. So then when you got to Maine, you were working for somebody else, just focusing on small animal medicine and surgery. And what was it that interested you in leadership and management?
Terrible leadership and terrible management.
I thought that was going to be the answer.
Yeah, it was a great guy. Great veterinarian. I learned so much from him about the ins and outs of just the focus of veterinary medicine and small animals exclusive practice. And I learned so much about what I did not want to do in the way to treat employees and how to run a bill of business, how to set up fee structures and how to treat clients and how to treat employees. I learned so much about what I wanted to not do. That is what interested me in like, man, my clinic was better than this. And it was in little Southwest Minnesota, and I didn't know what I was doing. And I did a better job than this. I wasn't perfect by any means, but learning from what I've done and then seeing how somebody else was doing it in a different setting, I was like, I think I can do better than this. And so I wasn't ready to take the leap and do my own thing because I've done that, and that was too stressful. But then I kind of wanted to do it for other people and see what kind of change I could bring about.
That's amazing. And so, I mean, when you first, this was when you decided first you worked as medical director at the 2 different AAHA certified hospitals. And how did you sell yourself as medical director and as somebody who could help them with leadership and management if at that point you really didn't have any official experience in those realms?
Yeah, lucky. I said, look, I own my own practice. I was a successful practitioner. I don't have any experience in an AAHA practice. I don't have any experience leading a small animal practice, but I'm telling you, I can do this. And they bought it.
Wonderful. And was that a really steep learning curve?
It was. It wasn't as steep as just becoming a veterinarian. That was much worse. And learning the business side of partnerships was a much more steep learning curve. I found a lot of the leadership qualities I already possessed. I just needed to unlock them. And so it was just something that I just needed to just embrace and be able to just look at myself from another person's perspective and just build those habits. So build my emotional intelligence. And that was really all it really took.
Exactly. Emotional intelligence. That's so funny. I'm actually writing about a concept called cognitive empathy right now, which is pretty much the same as emotional intelligence.
Yeah. I think I can see how that would be.
Yeah. So, and that's about, learning to see yourself from other people's perspective and modify your behavior based on perspective taking from them, like trying to figure out what's going on in their heads and what they want.
It makes it easier to relate to people. If you you can really take a good hard look at yourself. It's a little scary to do that at first because you have to realize your flaws and your weaknesses and your shortcomings in order to be able to see how other people see you and how you're presenting yourself.
Right. And to be willing to improve.
Yeah, that's the biggest part.
Yeah. So tell me, like, when you were working at this small animal practice for somebody else and you felt that it was poorly managed, what were some of the things that really you thought were terrible, the biggest things?
Well, I guess when there would be an employee who would do something that was incorrect, they needed correction. He would walk out into the treatment floor and yell at them at the top of his lungs. And just embarrass them in front of everybody, just humiliate them. That was his HR style was humiliation. And I didn't think that was very good. I thought that was, it was awful to be on the receiving end of that, because I was a few times. And it was awful to watch it with other people, because they would just, crumble. They would fall apart. And I wasn't a crumbler really. So he and I went toe to toe a few times almost, because it was like, no, I've been in this for long enough. You can't yell at me like that. I don't deserve that. And so it was a tough time as far as that. I mean, that was his style. The other part, one of the other things that was a huge no-no as far as the way to treat clients was they were sort of whisked in and out of the exam room like numbers. Mm-hmm. The amount of time that they spent with any one team member was very minimal, mm-hmm. and that the support staff was never really given any empowerment. They were never really given any lead role in the experience for the client, which I feel is really very important to their bonding with the clinic and bonding with the team, is to be able to feel like they have a connection with everybody.
And I bet the medicine suffered too.
It did. On occasion, they were whisked through so fast that we missed things. I mean, there was one time we were going into surgery. It was his surgery day, and I was light on appointment, so I was just helping him prep his patients for the day. And he would whip through there and get things pre-medded and this and that and the other thing. And I was looking at his chart. I'm like, hey, wait, you haven't done the blood work. He goes, we'll do it after. I'm like, that kind of defeats the purpose.
Yeah.
So it was stuff like that was it was hard to watch as a person who's still trying to perfect my skills and try not to develop bad habits. And that's always been one of my goals when I decided to make the change from mixed animal to small animal exclusive. I needed to promise myself I was never going to make the bad habit thing be part of my practice. And so that was difficult for me.
It was difficult to keep that promise to yourself?
No, to watch somebody else not doing that. Uh-huh. And try to still be true to myself, because there were so many shortcuts that were being taken. And it actually is. Well, I guess that's true. It is hard when everybody around you is not doing that.
Exactly. And it's not your practice.
Not my practice. And I would actually be ridiculed and criticized for gowning for surgery.
Yes.
Or putting the mask on during surgery. That was a huge no-no in his practice, but I did it anyway. I was like, no, you're just going to have to yell at me. He's like, why do you do that? To irritate you. That is why I do it. Just to irritate you.
Good for you.
That became our joke after a while. He really made him mad the first time I said it. But then after that, he's like, okay. All right, so you're just going to irritate me.
I think that a lot of vets feel this way when they get out of school. They learn about, the most advanced medicine. And then when they're in the clinical rotations in teaching hospitals, they're learning the best medicine. And then they get out and unfortunately, I think a lot of privately owned hospitals are something to the extent of what you're describing.
It can be kind of disappointing. It bursts your bubble when you get out sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have to, I love how you stood your ground despite the pressure, because I've been in that situation myself, and I know there's a lot of pressure to do it their way, the way they've always done it.
There's no pressure. And I've got an open mind. I learned a few tricks from him that I thought were great. I still do them to this day.
Right.
Other things that I'm like, that's cheaping out on the medicine. I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, that's interesting. To try to maintain that balance, have an open mind. Maybe they have something to teach you, but you have to know where to draw the line and what standards you're going to keep.
Right. I think you have to be very firm in what you believe and what your own personal vision is for veterinary medicine.
Right. So then, as you were the first position you had as medical director, did you just love it? Was it?
I did. I loved it. It was sort of, they had never had a medical director before, so they kind of wanted one. And so I think that's probably why I was able to slide in there as that, because they didn't really know what they were doing as far as having a medical director. And I didn't know what I was doing in being a medical director. So we kind of built this job description together, and it was not the entire medical director job description that I now write for my hospitals, but it was pretty good. We reviewed policy and set protocol and set standards of care, and really worked with the staff to making sure everybody shared the same core values in executing those standards of care, and it was a lot of fun. It was a blast. Loved it.
Oh, wow. That does sound good. And it must be really satisfying to be able to make the improvements that you envision.
It is. Yeah, it is. That's a part of hospital leadership that I really enjoy. It's coming up with an idea, seeing if it will work, and then being able to go, okay, now we're going to try it this way. And sometimes you go, whoops, that did not work exactly as I thought. We're going to revise that, and we're going to do it this way now. And to see which path will align people all in the same direction.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, I mean, that's part of the entrepreneurial spirit too. Try it and see if it works. If it doesn't, try something else.
That's exactly it.
Now, when you were working as medical director, either at the first or the second of the two large hospitals, did you ever practice clinically?
Oh yeah, I practiced full time.
Oh wow! Oh wow!
So it was a full-time practice schedule, both, and that made it very difficult to do a good job at it, but it was still fun. I enjoyed it.
Right. I mean, how much extra time out of your week did it take to be the medical director?
Depends on how much you want to do. If there's a lot of work to be done, it could take an extra 20, 25 hours a week of work putting in. So there were a lot of times I would work 50, 60, 70 hours in a week just to get everything done.
Wow. But I think that hospitals where the medical director actually practices clinically, so that he has to practice under the policies he has created, that tends to work out better for everybody else that he's managing.
That is exactly right. And that's one of the reasons why, like even now as chief operations officer, I still step into clinics and have practice days every once in a while.
That's great. Just so that you can see what your policies actually look like from the other side.
How it looks, how it feels to practice exactly, do the protocols that I've written. And so. Wow,
I love that. Yeah. And so I met you, or we actually never have met face to face.
No.
This is the first time that we've seen each other's faces. But I met you when you were the recruiting and professional relations director for VCA Animal Hospitals. I was looking for another job, and we had a very brief relationship, but I took to you immediately. I found you very genuine and interesting and easy to talk to. And but that didn't last long for you, that position, was it?
Actually, just a few months. I ended up having an illness in my wife's family that I needed to be excused from, and then they did not want to give me the time that I've been there for a few months. They're like, no, you can't have that time. I needed it. He had my father-in-law had a terrible stroke, and my wife needed me to come back and help care for him.
Wow.
And so I had to make a hard choice, and I loved that job.
You did?
It was so much fun because I like people, and I like seeing new places, and I traveled all the time and got to meet new people every day, and I loved it. I was very disappointed, and it was very difficult to make that decision, but turned out pretty well. And it was a tough road there for a little bit because then I struck out on my own and did my own consulting gig, which was another learning experience as far as how to market yourself and how to actually get people interested in veterinarians are tough because they don't like to have anybody, like, they want everybody to do it their way. They don't want to do it somebody else's way. Huh. And getting people to actually just even hire you at all as a independent consultant is tough.
Huh. Yeah. So I'm so sorry about your father-in-law.
He's doing great now. He's an old,
Good.
old Irish farmer. I think he's indestructible.
Crusty old Irish farmer. Well, good. I'm glad to hear it. And it's so unfortunate. Like, and that wasn't even, it wasn't like you were in practice and they were depending on you to be there or patients wouldn't be seen. It was, I'm really surprised.
Full disclosure, I thought it was a little unfair because I worked remotely most of the time, and I said I work remotely just from Minnesota. And
Yeah.
they're like, yeah. So,
Wow.
Okay.
Ooh, yeah. That's, I have to say, one of the things that concerns me about corporate medicine is it's just so cookie cutter and you cannot color outside the lines. It doesn't matter if it makes sense or not. This is, these are the rules and this is the contract you have.
Yeah, that's right. That's a concern. And I'm interested, maybe a little bit concerned about how the Mars takeover of VCA is going to affect, is going to shape that organization as well. I know it's shaped Blue Pearl in a not very satisfactory way. So,
right.
Because in my recruiting efforts for our organization, I'm picking up a lot of Blue Pearl specialists.
I bet.
They are flooding out of there. I'm able to pull them in because of our personal touch to our HR.
I bet. Oh, I bet they feel like they've died and gone to heaven.
Good.
Crossed over to the bright side. So when you first started as an independent consultant, you said that was also hard and scary as well. Tell me a little bit about that.
So I didn't have any idea how to really market myself to veterinarians. And so built a website and basically just went to veterinarians that I knew and just visited their clinics and got some ideas about what they would be looking for, not that they necessarily were, and put ads out in like the Minnesota VMA and put ads out in the different local VMAs for services. And I got a few bites here and there. Mostly were referrals from people that I knew. And so I just never had a big bill of business, and it was never quite enough to really support my family. So I did relief work in hospitals in between there just to make do. So.
Wow. That's what I think a lot of times that's what you have to do when you're starting your own business.
Yeah, you just sort of scrap together an income.
So you were charging by the hour for your consulting services, or was it like packages?
Different, depends on what people wanted, but most of the time it was by the hour, and there's different hourly rates for what I was doing. If it was just administrative stuff or counseling staff, because a lot of times staff come to me with issues. Actually, just before our conversation, I got a phone call from a staff member at a hospital that I'm consulting on now, and she was having issues with her boss, and she wasn't sure exactly how to mediate that conversation or how to go about that conversation. So I just was coaching her a little bit on some ways to approach him that would not inflame the situation. So.
Wow, what a fantastic resource for people to have.
Yeah, and then so the guy will get a bill for it. So.
As it should be. I mean, that's your time. You've got all this experience, and I'm sure you were able to help.
Hope so.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's one of the hardest things. I remember when I first started in practice and I was brand new and the learning curve was ridiculous. And I was just struggling in so many ways. And I did not have an emotional intelligence or cognitive empathy at that time because I was just drowning under like, oh my God, I don't know anything. And, so staff would complain about me. Oh, she's rude. She's bossy, whatever, But then what would happen is my boss would then say, the staff said, and I would never know who said it, what they said, what the context was. So it wasn't really helpful feedback for me because it was just like, somebody doesn't like me. But I didn't know like specifically what did I do? And maybe it was a misunderstanding or, oh, I remember that. Yes, I was distracted. And then I could apologize. So
having direct, meaningful conversations about things is the only way to go.
I agree. So now in your current position, You're managing a multi-site hospital group in New England. You're the chief operations, and you still occasionally step in and do a day as a doctor.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it sounds like from what you began with your independent consulting, just sort of a few random jobs here and there, small jobs here and there, working relief, and then you've built it up so that you actually can do this and make a living from it full time.
Yep, that's yeah. So right now that's basically I work as my boss's private consultant in all of her practices, and so that's what I do. I build a client experience in each one of the practices, and we actually went through a period this last year where the culture was not right in one of our hospitals. It was our biggest hospital, and so we ended up inviting most of the doctors to find a different path. So they ended up resetting our culture because it had gotten so negative in that hospital that we pretty much started over from scratch with our entire staff, which has been amazing. It has been amazing to watch that hospital really grow and blossom over the last. It was 1 year ago, December 1st, that we made that decision that we were going to part ways with 5 out of 6 of our doctors.
Oh my God! What about the support staff?
Support staff, about 30% of them left with those doctors, but the ones that were non-toxic stayed with the company, and they really blossomed. There was a lot of bullying going on, and it was a situation that no one deserves to be in when they go to work. They need to be safe, and they need to feel supported and empowered, and that wasn't happening. And I couldn't make it happen. I tried for a year to make it happen, and it didn't work. So that was our.
What a momentous decision.
Yeah, it was terrifying. Like most of the things I decide, it was terrifying. And my boss was like, "Are you sure you want to do this?" I'm like, "I think I have to. This is the only way." And so I personally worked a bulk of those shifts. I would be on for 36, 48 hours at a time. And it's an emergency clinic too. So, and I've never worked emergency before. I'm not an emergency practitioner. So.
Oh my God.
Well, this is what I'm going to do for a bit. So.
But okay, it was your decision, but you were willing to bear part of the responsibility for that decision. You went in there and filled in.
Yep, I told her I'll bear the brunt of it. If I can't get them filled, I'll do it myself.
Wow. I think that demonstrates a great deal of integrity. That really impressed me.
Or stupidity. What are they?
Well, I mean, it's like standing behind your decisions, and I think that's great. And so was it difficult to find new ER doctors to bring in? And were you using relief ER doctors at the time as well?
Yeah, it was a very expensive year for us because we used a lot of relief veterinarians during the year. A great group of relief veterinarians, fantastic. Couldn't get any better. And we put on a pretty heavy presence on LinkedIn and other avenues for social media and then just your typical AVMA ads, VCCS ads, and all the ads, just hit them hard. And I actually got probably 25, maybe 30 applicants, and I was able to select my 5 people off of that.
Wow, that is really great. And
yeah, very, very good response.
Yeah. How long ago was that?
It was this year.
This year. Okay.
Started in December of 2016.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now I've heard, and tell me if you have a different perception, but I've heard that there's a shortage of veterinarians in the Midwest and in the West. For instance, here in Arizona, apparently, like nobody can find vets, but that there's an oversupply on the east side of the country. So do you think the reason you had so many applicants was because there's an oversupply there, or?
Most of my applicants didn't come from the East Coast.
Oh.
So I hired one from Oklahoma, one from Washington State, 2 from Washington State, one from Ohio, And the other one was in Massachusetts. So everybody except for one was from someplace else.
Oh my gosh. Any new grads?
One new grad.
What was it about this new graduate that made you choose her over 20 other applicants that probably had more experience?
Same thing that makes me just admire her now. She is a phenomenal energy. She's incredibly infectiously positive. She has this passion for veterinary medicine that just is just like, it just is her. She just exudes this passion for veterinary medicine, this excitement every single day. And I talked to her on the phone, just did a phone interview, and I told my boss, I'm like, I'm going to hire this one. She's like, you haven't even met her yet. I'm like, I'm pretty sure I'm going to like her. So I flew her up, and she came in, and she was at Ohio State, and she came in and I usually have them spend a few hours. We'd have this whole day. I craft all my visit days to be, we meet for breakfast, and then we meet the team, and then we work on the floor for a few hours with people, and then we have a recap dinner, and they go home. Well, one of my relief doctors got sick, and so I was on the floor for 24 hours. So I was like, well, this is all going to change. So I'll have breakfast brought in, you and I'll talk, and then I'm the guy on the floor, so we'll do that, and then you can go if you want. She ended up staying for 16 hours, helping me on the floor and helping me with records and just getting involved with cases and talking to the staff and just bonding with people. And at the end of it, I said, "Are you looking for it? Are you looking anywhere else? Because I'd like you to not." And this was 5 months before she graduated, and she's like, "Really?" I'm like, "I'll shoot you an offer tonight. I'm done. You got it."
Amazing.
And she started in June, and she's just getting better every day. I see her, she just gets better.
Now, what sort of mentorship program or mentoring do you have set up for her? Because if you do hire a new grad, especially for emergency, you do need to give them some support. So what do you do?
I was with her. I personally sat with her on every single shift until she told me to go away.
Oh, no. Oh, my God. That's like, that would have been my dream come true. Where were you, Dr. Hunt, when I needed you?
Yeah, well, who knows? I was all over the place.
Oh, my gosh.
So by the end of June, she would text me and say, "Don't come in. Dr. Hunt, I got this." So I would be like, "All right, I'm right here." And so still to this day, she runs into problems or she has any questions or anything like that. She'll shoot me a text message or give me a quick call or shoot me an email, and I can answer most of her questions just over the phone. Every once in a while, I need to come and help her. Like she has her first GDV, I went and scrubbed in and made her do it, but I sat and watched. And so every once in a while, I get a 3 o'clock in the morning call where I got to get up and go help her out. But otherwise, really self-sufficient.
You are on call 24/7 for her?
For her, actually, for anybody in their organization.
Amazing. And so this new grad that's working at the ER hospital, is she just doing days or is she doing nights? Is she always on by herself, or are there sometimes other doctors?
So we have a rotating schedule. So we have a pretty awesome schedule for these guys. They only have to work 4 or 5 shifts every 2 weeks. So they rotate days to nights with a week off in between. And they do 5 shifts. They do 2 on, 2 off, 3 on, then 7 off, and then they start over again. And they rotate from days to nights. And most of the time, she's on by herself. She's a rock star.
That is so amazing. Good for her. And good for you. I love this story. Let's see. So what are the other things that you're doing for this hospital group that are particularly satisfying or notable for you? You're changing the way that they deliver medical care.
So a lot of times we take for granted that the clients are always going to be there, right? And we walk in the room as doctors and as techs and as receptionists, and these people are in there taking up our time, and then they pay us for that, right? And that's sort of our transaction that we think about in veterinary medicine. And I started noticing that my compliance was a lot better if I let the client take the lead in most of the experiences. So I'll let them, they're not really going to be calling the shots as far as medicine, but they're going to play a part of it. And where I started looking at that was from my own experience with my children, taking them to a pediatrician. I noticed that I liked to have a say in what was going to happen next. And whether or not, I'm not going to do what the doctor says, I mean, because they're my kids, right? But I liked them to ask me what I thought. And so by partnering with the clients, compliance goes up. And then that feels better for everybody. It feels better for the delivery team, for the technicians and the CSRs, the client service representatives, for the doctor, because you feel like you did good that day. You know, you did a good job, and you helped animals, and you did your thing, and you helped people. But by taking the focus off of what I call the doctor-centric model, where the doctor comes in and vomits their greatness all over people in the room, and walks out. Instead, you walk in there and you do a lot of nonverbal communication, sitting down next to people, sitting on the floor, keeping your body square with people, leaning forward, reflecting back what people are saying, and asking them for their opinion, asking them for their feedback on. I've heard that go wrong a few times, where a doctor has gone, "Do you understand what I'm saying?" "No, that's not what I want you to say." Say, "Do you have any questions? Can I clarify anything more for you? How do you feel about this going forward?"
Right.
And,
do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth?
so there are ways to do it. And I do a lot of training with the staff as far as how to reflect, people's emotions back, towards them, and reflect how they're feeling, and be able to pick up on how they're feeling. And a lot of training on what the client's experience is like in our hospital. So a lot of times I'll have people conduct a whole visit and just have one of our staff members just sitting in the corner, just watching the way it feels to be in that room, and feel okay. Everyone wants to be included, and I guess that's sort of the center of it, including the client in the entire process. And I actually do lectures on this around for veterinary practice management groups and whoever will have me. So I do lectures on it. So
That's fantastic. And so can you just explain for people who are listening who may not know what compliance means?
Yes, it's the word yes. So people agreeing to your treatment plan. It's not necessarily means. Of course, it means bigger dollars for the hospital, but more than that, it means they're willing to partner with you on your treatment plan. So they're willing to say, yes, I do think we should do that 40X again this year, even though I just did it last year, and the doctor before only said I had to do it every 3 years, for whatever reason. I hear that sometimes. Yes, I do need to do the wellness screening every single year on my pet, the CBC and the chemistry and the urinalysis, and because it's the right thing to do. And for me, compliance is more than just selling heartworm tablets or giving someone the Simparica or whatever it is you're giving for flea tick. It's more about them being compliant owners in that they're taking an active role in their companion's healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what it means to me.
Okay. And do you have any way of measuring, like whether or not client compliance is going up? I know some hospitals try to measure that. And I've always been curious, how do you do that?
It is hard.
Yeah.
So the easiest way to measure client compliance is return visits. So the people who have the frequent flyers are more compliant owners, typically, and then average case transaction. So it's average client transaction is another way of doing it, because the more compliant somebody is, honestly, the more money they spend, because things cost money.
Okay. Well, let me just backtrack a little bit because I thought of another question. I just find the idea of how you swept out all the ER doctors and then brought in new ones fascinating. And can you tell me a little bit about, because I'm actually being offered a position at an ER now,
Mhm.
and what did you offer them? What was in the contract? Did you fly them out for their interview, pay for their hotel? Did you offer relocation help?
All of that. So we fly them out, we pay for their hotel, we wine and dine, entertain them. If they are there for more than one day, then either I personally or uh, Dr. Gary, my boss, or Lars, her husband, would actually take them for a tour of the area. This is a gorgeous place to be. We're on the seacoast of New Hampshire, so there's nothing more beautiful on the entire planet, in my opinion. So that's a plug for here. And so we take them up and down the seacoast, take them to eat at, really nice, beautiful places that overlook the ocean, or take them if they like mountains. We'll drive them up to the mountains and show them the mountains, the White Mountains, or basically just show them what it's all about. And the interview process, I try to keep it very informal. So really learning who they are, which is more important to me than what they know. Of course, they have to know something, but who they are as a fit for the team and the culture that I want to build is the most important thing. So it's one of the things that people had said was, people who signed on with us said they really liked the interview process and they felt they got to know us personally on a personal level and what our goals were and what our vision is for the hospital and where we're going. And that's the most important thing for me, to have a good fit that way.
Yes, I think you're right. My husband works at a hospital here, and they hired him because they thought he would fit into the culture,
Mm-hmm.
and that he'd be pleasant to work with more than, what he knew.
Yeah.
So much more.
People have to have the aptitude and the desire. And so if you have the passion and the aptitude, I can teach the other stuff. So like with my new grad that I hired, she said, I didn't hire anybody who wouldn't do surgery. If they didn't know surgery, I don't care. I can teach that. And we have 2 boarded surgeons who can also teach that.
Oh,
so
wonderful.
But they must have the passion for it. They must want to do it. If they didn't want to do it, I could keep moving. I would move on to the next candidate. If they, just because in our particular situation, they're the only doctor there. They have to be able to cut something.
Mm-hmm.
If we were a much larger practice, we wouldn't have that need. If we had an on-call surgeon 24/7, but we do not.
Right.
So once I figured out where their interests, were sitting, where they're positioned in their interests and their passion and their vision, and sort of their own, identity as a feature in our culture, then it was easy. If they had all those things lined up, then it was an easy decision.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And in terms of the contract itself, for the ER doctors that you hired, did you put a non-compete clause in their contracts?
We did. We have a high density of emergency practices around us, and so we absolutely did. There's one that is our direct competition that is less than a mile from our hospital, and so we put a 15-mile non-compete that's good for 2 years after they leave the practice.
And you've been in veterinary medicine much longer than I have. You have a lot more experience in contracts and that side of that med. So forgive me if I have incorrect perceptions, but I'd like for you to educate me. Because I thought, and I remember they would bring lawyers, practice managers in to talk to us when we were vet students, and they told us about the non-compete clause. And my understanding was the purpose of the non-compete clause is not really to prevent anybody from competing. It's to prevent unfair business practices. So if you're a GP and you are working for somebody else and you're building all of these loyal client relations on your boss's dime, you can't just open a shop next door and steal all those clients from him. So I thought that was the purpose. of a non-compete. And so, like the first job I had out of vet school was an ER, and there was no non-compete. And I've talked to other friends that have ER experience, and it's sort of half and half. I know a lot of the corporate practices have non-competes in their ER contracts, and then, but so I'm just wondering, like, am I wrong about thinking this way about ER?
No, it's the way we look at it for our ER doctors is that we have because we only have 6 that are on the floor. The referring veterinarians develop quite a relationship with our doctors, and so if they were to go someplace else, we actually will have referring veterinarians call up and say, "Hey, is Dr. Chaffee on or Dr. Hunt in? I want to just bounce a case off of them. When are they going to be in next? I want to bounce a case off them, or should I just send them an email?" So they build these really tight relationships with and which there are a lot of clinics. You wouldn't think it would be that way, but it is. And so people they really get attached, and they're like, oh, sometimes they'll say, "Who's on tonight?" And we used to get that actually quite a bit. Now they don't care because everybody's awesome. They know that they're going to have a good relationship, good interaction with everybody, but they still have their favorites. And so if they were to go down to the one a mile away, our fear is that loyalty would follow them, and we would lose a whole hospital out of our referral base.
Thank you for explaining that to me. Now that makes sense, because your referring veterinarians are your customers.
That's it. That's our main customers are referring veterinarians.
I see. Okay. Well, in my case, there's only one ER, and the non-compete clause in the contract that I'm considering basically would prevent me from even opening my own mobile practice for 2 years.
Really, doing just general practice or anything?
No general practice, no consulting, nothing. And there's only one ER.
That would be
one.
My opinion is that would be very indefensible on their part, because there has to be. So all of our contracts have like profession clauses in it, so you can't practice in a like. You can't. Any of our doctors could leave and do general practice right next door.
That's fair.
Doing that, any of our specialists could leave and start do emergency or general practice next door. They couldn't practice in their specialty. So if you're a general practitioner, it would be you could go do emergency right next door, and that wouldn't make any difference. But you couldn't do general practice. So it has to be to a like or similar profession, and that's how ours are rock solid. We've had a couple of people who have violated it, and we win.
Okay.
Every time, because ours are governed by reasonableness. That's all. These things have to be governed by reasonableness and defensibility, and so ours are because it's only. We're not going to ask somebody to never practice again within 15 miles. You can't practice emergency medicine within 15 miles. And that relationship with referral base.
Yes. So that sounds very reasonable and fair. Did you have people ask about the non-compete clause? Every
single one. And actually, I usually bring it up. So because I want everybody to be informed as to what we're doing.
Especially if they're moving out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I usually will, when I go through it, I give them the offer, and I ask them to call me before they accept the offer, because I want to run through the entire contract, all 22 pages.
How many pages?
22.
22 pages?
My lawyers love to write. So they put them together, they give me all the pieces, and then I just sort of slide the spots in and fill in the names for the contracts. Most of it's just silly stuff like going over benefits, and they've like 4 pages of benefits.
4 pages of benefits.
4 pages of benefits, and then there's the description of what constitutes full-time. There's like a page and a half. It's all lawyery stuff. So it's easy to get to 22 pages when you have 4 pages of benefits and a couple pages of what it means to be full-time. Define full-time. Define actually, we cut it down a lot because we stopped doing production on our ER doctors. We just pay them by the number of shifts. If they want to make more money, they just work an extra shift and we give them cash. So, because ER is so much like this, it was really unfair. We started looking like, some of them would make a bunch of production in the summer and nothing in the winter. We're like, you know what? Let's just let them earn the same all year round rather than suffer in the winter. And, so we'll take one for the season in the winter and then we'll get paid back in the summer is the way we look at it. So rather than our associates feeling the brunt of it, we just sort of be the even ourselves.
It's so great to hear, how fair-minded you are and you try to be, and, to not just try to get the most for giving the least.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and there is a day practice. There was a veterinarian who wanted to work at the ER, and she had left a day practice, and they had a very restrictive non-compete, and she could not go and work in ER from day practice. And I just feel like, I know a lot of corporations are just putting in these really restrictive non-competes from what I've heard and seen. And I don't feel like they're accurately representing the spirit of what that was supposed to be for. And people are just signing them, and I don't think it's right.
No, it probably isn't right, and people need to look at those, and they really, if they have any questions, they really should talk to an attorney and just bounce it off them. That's what the attorneys are there for. Sometimes the attorneys will come back and give you a bunch of baloney that you don't really need to worry about because it doesn't pertain to you or anything like that. But a lot of times the attorneys will go focus right down on the non-compete because that's the most common sticking point for most people who leave a job.
Yes. Do you get the perception that I'm expressing about more and more practices, especially corporate practices, are putting in really restrictive, not reasonable non-competes?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's not even just necessarily corporate practices. I see that happening all over the place where people are doing these 25, 30, 50-mile non-competes for, it's just, the great thing about those is they're completely indefensible because they, when the courts look at these things, they first look and see if it's reasonable. That's the first thing the court's going to look at. I beat my non-compete in my first partnership. The judge threw it out because I had a 50-mile non-compete for 5 years.
But they took you to task?
Oh yeah, they took me to task and I won. And then they had to pay all the legal bills for it. So the judge said, no, that's not reasonable. He's here, he lives here, his family lives here. And you can't make somebody, in the United States, you can't make somebody move away to get a job. That is not reasonable. So 50 miles, I would have to move to a different town. So he said, nope, that's indefensible. It's unreasonable. It doesn't even pass the reasonableness test. Mm-hmm. And so the whole thing was chucked.
I think, unfortunately, a lot of new veterinarians, naive veterinarians, they will sign these and it'll be hanging over their heads. And then because they've signed it, and if they leave, they actually will abide by it.
They'll be afraid.
Yeah, it's something that really concerns me, this trend. All right, I know you've got to go. Thank you for being so generous with your time. I want to ask you is there anything else that you want to tell future veterinary doctors, or special piece of advice that you would like to give them?
I guess my piece of advice would be never let go of the reason why you wanted to do it in the first place. It's not an easy road. It's a tough road to go down being a veterinarian, and especially in today's changing climate in veterinary medicine. There's a lot more corporate influence. There's not that that's necessarily a bad thing, but it's different, and it's different. It's something that we all need to sort of take into account, that there's a different climate. But I would say don't let that change the reason that you did this in the first place. That's my one piece of advice.
Remember your original reason for going into veterinary medicine.
Remember your original reason. Remember your passion. Remember why you did it. It's going to be important to keep hold of that as you go through the years.
And do you have anything to say about, what's going on in terms of burnout and compassion fatigue? What do you think vets can do to prevent that from ever happening? Or if they've already got it, what do you think would help?
Well, I think a lot of us go into this and we're not aware of how consuming it's going to be. It's going to consume your personality. It's going to consume your life. You become veterinary medicine. You don't. There's no dabbling in veterinary medicine. You are veterinary medicine or you're not. And I think you have to be very clear with yourself what your limits are going to be, and you have to make sure to schedule time for yourself and for your family and for your personal life. If my wife were standing behind me right now, she would say, I don't do a very good job of doing that because I live and breathe it. And I'm okay with that for a time, but then I need to I have to take a forced time out and just regroup and be there for myself and my family and what's really important in life.
So you found a way that works for you. You work full out for, long periods of time. And then you say, okay, I need to leave town. I'm going to Maui. Yeah. Right.
I need to get out of here and recharge, regroup, figure out, get back in touch with myself and my family and what's important to me. And then I can go back at it again for another.
Right. Whereas other people might find that their rhythm is more, I must have my Saturdays and Sundays or whatever. So it's going to vary.
Have whatever. And it's one of the reasons we designed the schedule that we did for our emergency doctors. So they had one full week off between banks of shifts. So it's like every 2 weeks to have a week off.
Well, I am really, really happy to have had the opportunity to talk to you. I've learned so much. And you've opened my mind on a number of issues that I will think differently about now going forward. I thank you for that. And I thank you on behalf of all the future veterinarians who are listening. I know it's going to be helpful to them as well. Is there anything, any way for people to look you up if they're interested in finding out more about your consulting company?
Sure. It is actually www.huntveterinaryconsulting.com.
All right. Thank you again, Dr. Timothy Hunt.
Thank you.